America is once again shocked, grieved, and horrified at a vicious attack by what looks like terrorists that took place in Boston. The FBI is looking for suspects in these terrible bombings. They left at least 3 people dead and more than 140 people seriously injured.
And one of them was an 8-year-old boy who was waiting with his mom and his sister to see his father cross the finish line. Charlene Israel has this look at the hunt for whoever was behind the blasts.
Across the world, major cities are on high alert today. The deadly bombings in Boston leading to a surge in security from Los Angeles to London. In Boston, investigators are trying to figure out who carried out this terrorist attack. The FBI is heading up the case, appealing for any video or still images taken by marathon spectators. Early this morning, officials searched an apartment in the Boston suburb of Revere, Massachusetts. Investigators were seen leaving a home carrying brown paper bags, plastic trash bags, and a duffel bag. On the scene of the explosion, bomb technicians are studying burn marks on bricks and concrete.
They're going to look at the components of the bomb. It will tell them, is this just somebody that put this together over the internet, or is this a bomb maker?
Meanwhile, doctors in area hospitals collect pieces of shrapnel from the injured, also to be examined. Still no word on a motive or any confirmed suspects, but the bombings came on one of Boston's most famous holidays, Patriots' Day. This attack is the first successful bombing in the U.S. since the attacks of September 11th. But in an address to the nation, President Obama urged against a rush to judgment, not using the word terrorism.
Make no mistake, we will get to the bottom of this, and we will find out who did this. We'll find out why they did this. Any responsible individuals, any responsible groups will feel the full weight of justice.
Other White House officials say the explosions are in fact being treated as terrorism. Some lawmakers agree.
Right now it has all the indicators in every aspect of being a Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda affiliated attack.
The Pakistani Taliban have denied any role in the bombings. As the details around the explosion continue to develop, stories of overwhelming acts of kindness are being reported. Boston residents offering their homes to out-of-town runners. Blood donors showing up en masse to donate to the Red Cross. Some running straight from the race, and rescue workers reacting immediately in the aftermath of the explosion. Charlene Israel, CBN News.
Well, our CBN News terrorism analyst Erick Stakelbeck is with us now from Washington. And Erick, what do these tactics tell us? Is this a lone bomber, or do you think it's something to do with some of the organized terror groups?
You know, Pat, it's tough to say right now, but that is the key question here. Was there an overseas link? Was this a guy or guys who, say, trained overseas in Yemen, in Pakistan, got bomb-making expertise there, then came back here to the U.S.? Were they U.S. citizens? We've heard some reports that this was, there's a Saudi who's in custody who may be here on a student visa. We don't know yet, but the big question, I think, is were there overseas links? I think, Pat, that signs, we can't say for sure yet, but signs are pointing to this being an Islamic terror attack. I know there was a lot of talk yesterday about it being tax day. Is this an anti-government extremist? In my experience, Pat, studying this for the past decade plus, when, say, a federal building is hit or an IRS building is targeted, that is more the anti-government type terrorist. With Islamic terrorists, Pat, it's usually indiscriminate violence, like what we saw yesterday, women, children, civilians, with what really appears to be no political point at all. That is a hallmark of Islamic terrorists. Also, the bombs here, Pat, multiple bombs. This is also a hallmark of groups like Al-Qaeda, of Hamas. Multiple bombs and ball bearings inside these bombs to kill even more people, maim even more people after the bombs go off. We don't know if there's a link overseas yet to an organized terror group, but it looks in the very least like some kind of lone wolf Islamic terrorist, but not sure yet.
Well, Erick, you know, it's a terrible thing that they do. They blow off a small bomb. People begin to crowd around to see what's happening, and then they blow off a big one that really injures a lot of people. Was it the same tactic here? There were 2 bombs that went off.
Yeah, Pat, it looks that way. First responders come, as you said, Pat. The first bomb goes off. Everyone rushes to the scene. Then a second bomb is set to go off just a few seconds after the first one. So when everyone kind of runs up to help the people injured from the first bomb, boom, the second bomb goes off. That's what happened yesterday, Pat. And also, as I mentioned, ball bearings inside the bombs. We see this in the Middle East a lot, Pat. Hamas does it in Israel. They'll put ball bearings, or they'll even put nails, wrap them inside these bombs so that when the bombs go off, even more people will be killed by the shrapnel afterwards.
Have you got any report about the injured? I understand about 130 people who were injured and some pretty serious stuff.
Pat, I'm hearing horrific, horrific things. People walking around missing limbs, laying around missing limbs. It looked like a war zone from what people are saying up in Boston. Looked like an absolute war zone, absolute carnage, blood everywhere, horrific scene, like a scene from war. And really, Pat, it is a war. If this was an Islamic jihadist attack, look, Islamic jihadists 33 years ago, Pat, declared war against us. We are at war. We need to come to grips with that and adjust mentally, psychologically, because terrorism, what happened yesterday, it's all about psychological terror, Pat. This is the face of it, right? Indiscriminate, at a joyous event, the Boston Marathon, women, children. One of the victims, Pat, an 8-year-old boy cheering for his dad. That's the epitome, the definition of terrorism.
There's a young man in custody, I understand, is a student on a student visa who's from Saudi Arabia. Have you got anything about him?
Not much, Pat. You know, he's reportedly 20 years old. We know they searched his apartment up in Revere, Massachusetts, which is a suburb right outside of Boston. So this guy apparently in custody. There were some reports, Pat, that he smelled of gunpowder. So we don't have all the details yet. But the fact that his apartment was searched, and also authorities took several bags of materials out of his apartments. So he's definitely a person of interest right now. But I think the big question, again, I hammer home the point, was there an overseas link? Or, look, was this just a small cell of guys in the Boston area, say young Muslims who were maybe radicalized online, inspired by al-Qaeda online, but no direct links to the group? We've seen many cases like that, Pat, dozens of arrests like that over the past few years. And remember, this is horrific what happened yesterday, and we even dodged some bullets in the past few years. Think of that Christmas Day underwear bomber, Pat. Think of the attempted Times Square bomber 3 years ago. We've dodged some bullets. Unfortunately, yesterday, it caught up to us, and let's hope this is the end of it.
Eric, thank you very much. And again, our hearts go out to these people who were wounded and injured. On a joyous day, Patriots Day in Boston, and the Boston Marathon draws people in from all around the world, and about 26 or 7,000 participants, about 17,000, I understand it, crossed the finish line before this bomb went off. But to think that somebody would be so vicious, so evil, as to want to kill little children and maim families who are there rejoicing in a sporting contest on a beautiful day in Boston. It just makes you sick at your stomach. But don't talk to me about religion of peace. No way. Well, Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN newsroom, beginning with a look at what's going on in the world's financial markets. Here's Lee.
Pat, investors are wondering what's next in the markets after Monday's steep sell-offs. They were looking for a rebound in stocks after the Dow fell more than 260 points Monday. On the same day, gold had its worst day in more than 30 years, falling a whopping 9%. Gold had gone up every year since 2001. Now some analysts say the long-term bull market for gold and other commodities is over. Others disagree. How about you, Pat?
I'm ambivalent. See, I'm agnostic. I really don't know. I've been a fan of gold because I think we're deflating our currency. The Fed is printing money like there's no tomorrow. We have unconscionable debts. Sooner or later, the nations that loan us money are going to say no longer will we accept dollars. It's just a question of time before we have a major financial crash. And people will be looking for some safe haven like gold. But for some reason, the big boys with the big money said, no, gold is a dead asset and we're not going to use it any longer. for the time being. And of course, these things trigger. You know, one has to sell, then they start dumping gold to meet their margin calls, and then somebody else has to sell because the price has gone down. But this was a precipitant drop, and I don't think it's going to sustain. I think that somewhere it'll catch, you know, a support level. We just don't know exactly when. Lee?
Pat, Iranian state television reports at least 40 people were killed in a major earthquake today. It flattened homes and offices in a slightly populated area near Iran's border with Pakistan. The quake was 9 miles underground, and it shook buildings across the region. It may have been the strongest earthquake to hit Iran in more than 50 years. The early estimate places the magnitude at 7.7 on the Richter scale. In 2003, by comparison, a 6.6 quake flattened the Iranian city of Bam. That quake killed some 26,000 people, Pat.
What we don't know on this one, again, is whether this is the start of some kind of seismic activity in that region, which is known for seismic activity. But if this quake had taken place in a populated city like Tehran and others, it could be 500,000 to 1 million people dead. So it was very serious. Fortunately, for the life, it didn't take place in a very populated area, but it was a monster quake. Lee?
Israel celebrated its 65th Independence Day today. Chris Mitchell takes a look at what that tiny nation has accomplished in the decades since its rebirth.
At 65, Israel stands out for what it's accomplished and how it's prevailed. For centuries before statehood, Israelis and Jews around the world faced persecution and military threats. Holocaust survivor Martin Baroni lived here during the 1948 War of Independence.
What they achieved, the whole world per capita, there's not a country in the world could have achieved from every point of view, from medical research to every aspect in life. It's just an amazing story.
Israel's population has also multiplied 10 times over since independence.
I think it's a miracle. We hope that it continues. It's very strong. It's a very encouraging place in which to be, and you can appreciate your historical roots of being Jewish.
Against incredible odds, Israel emerged as the leading military force in the Middle East. That helped lead to pioneering developments in technology that have helped Israel on the battlefield as well as the home front. As part of a memorial ceremony, Israelis paused to honor the more than 23,000 Israeli soldiers and thousands of terror victims who died for their country. Peace is still sought with its closest neighbors, the Palestinians. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu maintains his people must stay strong.
We are not bloodthirsty. Our hand is extended in peace to all people and all states near and far. But over the generations, we have learned that only a fierce protection force can promise that we will not be harmed.
And whether the enemy is an Egyptian pharaoh or a nuclear Iran, the people of Israel appear ready to stand together.
We're used to it. Since the beginning of Israel, we had a lot of threats, and until now, I think we knew how to deal with that.
Yeah, they shall overcome. We outlived Pharaoh. We outlived all the what you call the titans of Russia. We outlived Hitler. We'll outlive whoever is going to stand in our way.
We've had adversaries before. We do have adversaries, but it only makes us think and how we can achieve more with these people breathing down our back, or with each other breathing down our back sometimes even. So I think the future is very bright.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And back here at home, Regent University is launching a new program to help African American and Latino students earn a college degree. It's called Take Two Through College. The university will partner with churches like the Potter's House in Dallas and other organizations to sponsor and mentor students at Regent. Each partner provides up to 50% of the tuition and fees for 2 undergraduate students. Regent then matches those funds.
One of the things we've found, Mark, is that Christian colleges and universities have not done that well recruiting students of color. So we're partnering with churches who have a very high commitment, or maybe even a demographic that's reflected in the Hispanic or African American community, because African American and Hispanic males in particular have dropped out of higher education.
Having a broader program that has mentorship as part of its key, that has a whole community that embraces the student, helps them take those steps and pursue those steps to completion.
Regent plans to enroll students in this program this fall. Dr. Campo hopes the program will serve as a model for other colleges and universities. And I know it's a program that's near and dear to his heart, Pat, because Dr. Campo himself is of Cuban descent.
That's right. His father came in from Cuba as a refugee and has made a very wonderful living for himself and a name for himself. And he's a very distinguished educator. And I'm just delighted at this initiative to help those less fortunate in the inner city. But if Hispanic and African American males have been dropping out of the higher education because they're not adequately prepared, we have a program that can prepare them to excel in college work.
A Hawaiian bed and breakfast has lost a discrimination lawsuit filed by a lesbian couple. The couple sued Aloha Bed and Breakfast after the owner said she was uncomfortable with him staying in her home because of her religious views. A judge ruled in favor of the couple and ordered the bed and breakfast to stop discriminating. The lawyer for the bed and breakfast says the ruling fails to acknowledge the First Amendment rights of the owner. Parts of New York's new gun registration law go into effect this week. Some firearms have been reclassified as assault weapons, and those who own them are now supposed to start registering them. The new law also limits the number of bullets allowed in magazines to 7, but opponents promise to continue fighting the measure in court. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.